Hello, hello, welcome back. It's time for Leading Women in Tech. I'm your host, Tony Collis, and today we are talking about how your leadership needs to evolve and change as you change roles. I was speaking to a client just yesterday about this, a CTO of a Fortune 5000 company, and she was talking to me about how each time her responsibility and scope has increased during her career journey, the tools she needed to get to that place no longer worked. The tools that she'd used to land that role actually now backfired. As she's progressed, the need for different leadership has also shifted. What worked 3 years ago is insufficient today, simply because of what's going on around us. And what worked for a more junior role actually needs to be thrown out as it now causes more problems than it solves. How often do you think about your leadership needs, how they need to change and evolve as you advance and the world around us changes? You likely think about how tech evolves, right? You likely think about the shifts that are going on around us, but have you thought about it from a leadership perspective? Each stage of our leadership has its own challenges, its own nuances in how we should respond to the changing world around us. And today I want to dive into this. I want to think about how we as leaders should be considering our responsibilities in this changing world rather than just considering how the company should respond. So let's talk leadership and navigating change while you climb the ladder in tech in this ever-changing world that we live in. Let's start with how leadership has had to change at all levels in just the last 25 years. In the early 2000s, with the dot-com bubble burst, between 2000 and 2002, many tech companies saw their valuations nosedive. Industry was hit really hard. If you were around then, all hands to you for getting through that, right? Leaders at that time had to be very resilient. They had to be adaptable, focusing on financial stability and rebuilding trust. A lot of trust was lost, particularly to the tech industry. This period was a shift from rapid growth to more sustainable business models, although we could have a debate about that. How sustainable has business been over the last 25 years? But there was a real change at that point in tech. Leaders needed to emphasize financial management, clear value propositions to ensure their companies were not only innovative, but also stable and reliable. Fast forward to a few years into the mid-2000s, and we see this explosive rise of social media. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all happened around then. The era demanded a new way of being digitally savvy from leaders. The more senior you were, the more you needed to care about it. Understanding the impact of social media on brand reputation, customer engagement. Most of us have experienced, if we've been around long enough, how posting on social media can get the customer success department to reach out to you and help you out, right? When that first happened, companies did not know what to do about it. Leaders had to embrace transparency. They had to look at real-time communications. It was no longer sufficient to have a 48-hour turnaround for a crisis. Real-time stuff changed the way we operated as leaders. We needed to be engaging with stakeholders in a way that was previously unimaginable. Digital literacy suddenly was a non-negotiable. Up until that point, you could lead a tech company, but not personally be digitally literate. That suddenly changed. Suddenly, leaders had to be engaged and on board. And this set the stage for how companies interact with audiences even today. Then came the global financial crisis of 2008. Wow, we all survived that one, sort of. Crisis management were suddenly essential. Every company had this front and center. The companies that survived, at least. We needed to ensure business continuity in the face of future economic downturns. We're still not out of the woods after that one, right? We had to maintain employee morale and engagement even when we were doing layoffs, balancing cost-cutting measures with efforts to keep the workforce motivated and still deliver. Communication, empathy needed to guide what we did in a way we hadn't relied on in the early 2000s. This uncertainty really brought to the fore how empathy and emotional intelligence were suddenly essential skills. I wonder if that is the turning point for when we suddenly realized the diversity dividend. It's been there all along, in my opinion, but I wonder if that was the first point when it was like, oh, We don't all have to behave like 1980s leaders did. I would call them managers, not leaders at that point. That traditional bro culture, blaming everybody for everything instead of taking ownership yourself. More empathy, more engaging your team suddenly became essential if your company was going to survive the 2008 financial crisis. Then in the early 2010s, we started talking about the adoption of cloud computing. Big data, I remember that one. Big data analytics took over the world. Everybody was like, are you doing big data? I realized I did actually do big data during my PhD, but it wasn't called that. I just dealt with a lot of data to get my PhD done. Suddenly, a leader needed to understand how to leverage cloud. They had to understand that data suddenly was one of the biggest currencies we had, but we didn't know how to use it. We're now seeing data being one of the most crucial currencies, but it's taken, I would say, a decade to really understand the power of it from the early 2010s. Data-driven decision-making became a core competency. One could argue up until that point, data-driven decision-making was nice to have, not a must-have. But with big data analytics, this became a pivotal part in strategic planning. If you want to survive the competition, you had to understand how to harness these technologies and have that competitive advantage to streamline operations. This is not just cost cutting. This is, we don't need to do that anymore. We can save money because we've got the data that says it doesn't actually deliver. It became a much more cutthroat world because we had the data saying, this is a nice to have, not a must have. Then in the mid 2010s, we had the mobile revolution. Internet of Things. Everybody has a smartphone. Everybody has interconnected devices. Everybody's suddenly on YouTube to learn everything. We had to have this culture of continuous innovation and rapid adaptation. Suddenly, if you weren't on social media and available for everybody to scroll on their phones on their commute in the morning, you were irrelevant as a company, unless you were doing certain special things. Cybersecurity alongside that becomes paramount. We have to have an expanded digital footprint, but that increases our vulnerability to cyber threats. Companies sprung up to deal with this, but equally every single company suddenly had to worry about cybersecurity. That's still manifesting today. Most companies now have a cybersecurity expert or team, or it's embedded across the entire organization because now it's bad news if you aren't taking care of the digital footprint of your team, your resources, and more important than anything, your customers. It was all about staying ahead of the technological trends and making sure your organization's security and adaptability were essential during this period. Then in the late 2010s, it's all about AI. This is still the main thing I'd say we're talking about today, although there are a few things that have come along since, such as COVID. But AI, machine learning, I remember the job I took just before I started this. It's 2017. Everybody was like, oh, is that a machine learning company? It actually wasn't. But everybody's like, the thing we were doing sounded like it might be machine learning. Suddenly, everybody is trying to jump on this. And we're looking at how can we integrate AI into our strategic vision? Companies were looking for potential. They're also worried about the ethical implications. Suddenly, ethics rises right up to the top. We were starting to get there with the security piece, but with AI, ethics is a number one priority. It should have been there with data. I think it was a bit hand-wavy with the data side, to be honest. Attracting and retaining talent with skills in AI, machine learning, is crucial. But not many people have those skills. It's a bit like big data in the early 2010s. People were desperate for people with big data experience, but there was no one that had that except people that accidentally done it. As suddenly you could command whatever you wanted in terms of salary. The same was true in AI. It's still kind of going on with AI a little bit. The number of people I have conversations with who are like, I want to move into AI. I should take a pay cut. I'm like, no, you don't need to. There aren't actually that many people out there with true AI experience. If you can demonstrate you can learn fast, AI is moving so quickly that even the people developing AI aren't staying on top of it. And then, of course, COVID-19 in 2020 accelerated our shift to remote work. Leaders had to quickly adapt to managing remote and hybrid teams. So this shifted the focus away from external forces changing how the business was delivering products like AI to how do we manage our teams? Tech came to the rescue. It was all about virtual collaboration and communication. But suddenly we had to look at employee well-being, mental health. Black Lives Matter happened at the same time. And suddenly everybody was struggling. Mental health and work-life balance became essential for us to get our heads around. At the same time, the tech industry suddenly took off. Tech was the forefront of how we were surviving COVID, being shut at home, not able to do things, not being able to get out. Tech was forefront in everybody's mind. Social media, almost overnight, needed to suck up every single person available in the workforce because their companies exploded. Companies that provide virtual collaboration took off. It was, in that sense, an unprecedented period. And I think we're still right-sizing from that. I think a lot of what's going on right now in the tech industry in 2024, as I record this, was all about that right-sizing. We overextended and we haven't quite come back yet. It's interesting to me we haven't quite come back yet. I don't know where we're going to go with that one. And then today, I still think the remote work hybrid thing is an important issue. And we're navigating what it means when a company says, no, we've got to go back to the office. And I would say poor leadership making that decision, because I think it should be the choice of the team. It shouldn't be about a leader saying, I can only manage when you are in the office. That to me is poor leadership. It should be about whether or not the individual works best remote or in person or a hybrid. Because actually, if you want your team to work well, you need to work around them. They're the ones delivering, not us as managers and leaders. But that's a whole debate for another day. But on top of that, we're now very much focused on sustainability and ESG, environmental, social, and governance criteria. Purpose-driven leadership is now very important. Leaders need to align business strategy with sustainability goals, demonstrating our commitment to social responsibility. We need to engage a broad range of stakeholders. We need investors and customers and communities to take a note of what we're doing in the environmental, social, and government space. And we need leaders to be more conscious of their organization's impact on the environment. We need society seeing that we are doing the right things. We need to be driving the right initiatives that promote long-term sustainability. So we take all that history and we look at today. What shapes our tech leadership today? Well, there's remote work, virtual teams, hybrid, still the norm. Although as I said, we are pushing people back into the office, that also has to be managed. I think that we are going to find in a few years' time, when we no longer have a workforce that's out of work, that we are going to struggle with talent again, and we're going to have a shift back again, because I think certain groups work better at home and they know this. So right now you can force them back to the office, but they're not going to perform as well. And secondly, as the talent pool right sizes and we aren't finding there are so many people for every single role, you're going to find that the really great talent says, hey, no, actually, I don't want those terms and conditions. And so these companies forcing everybody back into the office are going to be tugging away and thinking, what do we need to do? Additionally, I think increasing diversity and inclusion is going to become even more important. We know that diversity improves overall team IQ, drives innovation. And leaders must be ensuring that this is not just a soundbite, but a reality in how we operate. The reality of being a leader today extends beyond running a team and setting strategy. It involves responding to the world around us, involving our leadership practices, embracing AI and the need for diversity. AI might help you streamline operations, allowing us to focus on high-level tasks. The number of companies I'm talking to where AI is not taking over roles, but it's making people more effective. It is helping people write creative materials faster. It is getting us out of writer's block. I use it to get out of writer's block, by the way. It doesn't write very well for me, but it's great for getting me unstuck. I know people who are using it for programming. I know people who are helping them use it to help them write reports or presentations. Now, you have to be very mindful of data privacy at that point if you're using a third-party tool. But right now, it's how AI is helping us build what we currently do faster. There aren't that many jobs, I would say, where it's directly replacing the person. It's that it's evolving that role, which makes us more effective, which you could argue is replacing people because maybe one person could do the job of 5. But actually, there aren't that many roles where genuinely that role completely doesn't exist anymore. Part of what we have to do as leaders is figure out how to streamline this, how to allow our team to focus on those higher level tasks while creating that inclusive environment and having the diverse perspectives that are valued and integrated. And I would say this has been on the rise for 20 years. Not the AI piece, but diversity, inclusion, allowing your team to impact strategy rather than sitting in a quiet room and doing it all by yourself. You can't afford to ignore this anymore. When you do, you suffer reputational damage, but you also don't flourish in the medium term. So this necessitates a new approach. Leaders must be adaptable. I hope you're seeing from this history that we always have to adapt. We need to be forward thinking. We need to be empathetic. We need to continuously evolve to meet the demands of everything changing around us. We need to embrace challenge, define new opportunities, and see where it's going to take the tech industry in the years to come. But as I said, it's not just the evolving world around us that makes our leadership evolve. It is also our career progression. So that's the other piece of this puzzle. And you have to take the two side by side. So let's break this down. Let's start with your first leadership role. So even if you've done this a while ago, stick with me here because I'm hoping you're going to see what I'm talking about in terms of the evolution you've experienced. Or maybe you've not evolved as much as you need to, and this might be a wake-up call for you. So if you take your first leadership role, often a team lead, it's a major shift from being an individual contributor, an IC. The initial challenge is your mindset. As an IC, you focus on tasks and output. You will still have that responsibility as a team lead, but you're now being measured on the success of everybody else as well. You have to deliver this that's yours, and your team has to deliver. It requires balancing hands-on work with leadership responsibilities, and this is tricky. You might still be involved in coding or project development, but now you also need to ensure your team is productive, motivated, and delivers. It can become very easy to end up micromanaging and doing their work for them because you can do it faster than them. That's why you were promoted. You need to be able to communicate and delegate well. You might not have done that before. You need to articulate clear goals and expectations. Empower your team to take ownership of their tasks. You now have the responsibility to navigate the evolution of the tech that your team is taking on. Maybe your team is transitioning to a new technology stack. You need to guide them through this change rather than just doing it yourself. You need to make sure that as you guide the change, other things aren't disrupted rather than, I'll let somebody else worry about that. Suddenly the mindset really kicks in. And if you're a remote or hybrid company, then as a new leader, you've got to know how to engage people that are remote. It's different engaging on an IC level to managing a team. It's no longer acceptable to say, I work best in person. That might be true. But the reality is that more and more teams are going to demand remote opportunities. And more of us need to be able to manage this talent pool who says, no, I work best out of the office. I certainly do. I have clients who work best in person, and I have clients who work best remote. Neither is wrong, but we do need to accommodate because when we have the best work from a person, that is when the magic happens. And you may also find as a team lead, it's your first opportunity to manage an off-site team. That might be in a foreign country. It might just be down the road or across the country. But either way, different location, you need to know how to manage that. If we then grow in your managerial role, your focus shifts. Your focus moves away from personal output to team output. This means developing your team members and recognizing their individual strengths, making sure they are each taking on work that works well for their specific skill set and passion. That's where great outcomes really happen. It's where it really matters that you understand this person is taking on stuff that they are going to be in their zone of genius on, and you're going to do great work there. But it also starts with handling performance issues. Team leads sometimes do this. More often than not, it's their manager that deals with this. You're going to have performance issues. You're going to have morale issues. You're going to have to start dealing with conflict. The more senior you become, you'll realize you stop spending so much time on the individual. As you start managing managers, they'll take on matching the work to the specific skill sets, and you might be tempted to interfere. You've been used to say, this works really well for person X. This works really well for person Y. You've got good at that. But now your job is to support your managers in doing that. And you might fall into the trap of micromanagement by doing it for them. Suddenly, you have to coach a manager in how to do it, not do it for them. They will make different decisions from you. This is the big mindset shift at this point, is realizing the decision they make is as valid as yours. It's just different. When you transition from managing individuals to managing managers, it's all about delegating responsibility and outcomes, trusting your managers to handle their teams, to deliver. Your focus shifts to strategic alignment and organizational goals. You will get information down that you have to deliver. That now becomes your job. You support your team to fulfill the company's objectives rather than being told in the previous role, this is what you've got to do. You are now saying, we've got to do all this. Team A is doing this, Team B is doing this, Team C is doing this, and trusting your managers to get on with making sure individual X is A, B, and C. You'll spend more time interpreting strategy, ensuring each of your managers knows that their entire team needs to deliver and make that happen. You're going to move away from individual performance to team performance metrics. Performance issues are now around how your managers are managing their teams. You may get brought in for individual issues, but only when it gets really bad. If it's not really bad, they're going to deal with it, and you're going to be coaching them in how to deal with it. Morale is now a game changer for you. You've got to get your managers on board with a vision or a strategy, even if you're not. If the company's rolling this out, remember your job is organizational and strategic alignment. That means your managers need to be on board so they can get their ICs on board. You need to show them how to do that. You've got to translate a fairly broad vision into something specific that energizes each team. What works for the company, it excites at a company level, stakeholders, investors, executives, does not excite the IC in general. It's now your job to help your managers translate that. This is the big thing. From there, you're going to move up into a role that's all about strategy. There might be several rungs in between, but depending on the size of the company, you might be a VP, an SVP, or a C-level executive. The further up you go, generally speaking, the more of your time you're going to be thinking about strategy, and the less you're going to be concerned about execution and organizational alignment. Somebody below you worries about the alignment. You're worried about strategy, and you're worried that it actually gets delivered. You don't actually do the delivering per se. In these senior leadership and executive roles, you are now managing experienced leaders who know how to deliver on strategy. You are now setting strategy. You're setting the vision. You're aligning your leadership team with this vision. You're saying to your directors or whoever's below you, this is our vision. This is our strategy. Tell me how you're going to deliver this bit of it that's related to you. But your job is to take their input and create that overall strategy so it aligns with the company strategy, the company performance. You're now going to spend a lot more time looking at not just the short-term goals, but the long-term vision. You're going to spend more and more time interfacing with teams who don't understand what you do, don't understand what your teams do, don't understand what your ICs do, or anything. Almost every client I've ever worked with has at some point expressed intense frustration about working with another department in their organization and how that department does not understand what they do. At this level, this is on us as leaders of big teams to work with our neighbor teams. We need to make sure our teams work well together to be the glue that sticks the organization together. You have to think and operate differently. What motivates this team, it does not motivate this team. And they may well butt heads. Your job is to get it working. So challenges here become high-stakes decision-making. The small stuff, that's passed on down. You're the one making the head-scratching decisions, the ones that make or break a company, the ones that keep you awake at night, but they don't have to, by the way. You've got to now maintain company culture. You're navigating complex organizational dynamics. You need to be looking at coaching, leadership, strategic planning. It's now your job to adapt the company to the evolving tech landscape I was talking about before. All that stuff I talked about in the first half of this episode, everything we've done over the last 25 years, those senior leaders, they have to absorb it. Right now, that's understanding the implications for AI. It's understanding the implications of sustainability and our reputation as businesses in terms of our sustainability and environmental credentials. As a leader, you need to personally evolve. You need to evolve with what's going on around us, and you need to evolve in your career. As I said at the beginning, what worked for your last job probably will backfire for this job. You have to throw the toolkit out and start again, build a new toolkit. You need to be looking at how you're responding as you change roles, how you're responding to external changes. even when we don't know what's coming next. This is the work I think is most exciting. This is why being a leader is so inspiring, because you get to be the one who delivers the future. But you have to have credibility. You have to have trust. Your team has to feel on the right foot from the start. You need to be able to communicate your vision, your expectations. You need to be open to feedback and willing to listen every single step of the way. Those ones don't go away. Those skills are valid at every single step of the ladder. When you become a team lead for the first time, you might face resistance from team members who were previously peers, and you have to address that head on. But as you become a senior leader, it's now resistance from change. It's resistance to you making big decisions that not everybody's on board with. You have to be able to delegate every single layer up. But at the bottom, it's about offloading work. At the top, it's saying, I can't make all these decisions. I'm going to reserve my decision-making power for the big stuff. Allow your team to take ownership and grow in their roles. And as soon as you add in transitions in tech, remote work, navigating something like COVID-19, and needing to actually transition how we operate and how we think as companies, adds into that additional nuance and the adaptability we need as leaders. We have to be proactive. We have to be having a flexible mindset. We have to stay informed about what's going on around us. I'm a big believer in disconnecting from the news, but you have to stay informed enough to be able to adapt to what's going on and support your team through it. You have to stay on board of technical changes in the industry you're in, and you have to network. I would say networking is more important than staying on top of the news, especially when the news is a bit depressing like it is today. But it's kind of an understatement, right? One of the things I want you to work on is your resilience and your team's resilience. How adaptable are you? How adaptable is your team? How are you fostering a culture of continuous learning and learning from mistakes, embracing change? How are you creating a culture of experimentation? How are you encouraging your team to learn and fail and pick themselves back up again? How is your company resilient? How are you resilient? How are you looking at your evolution? And next time you start a new role, what are you throwing out that worked to get you where you are today? What are you letting go of? What are you doing to maintain your work-life balance while learning new tools to up-level you in your new role? This is about preparing every step of the way. It's not just steering a ship. It's assuming there's a storm ahead and making sure you're resilient enough to steer through it with you and your company. You need to be proactive. You need to be flexible. You need to be supportive. Your team, your company need to embrace change and need to say, we can ride this out. And remember, what's changing today, whether it's the .com bust or AI and remote work, something new is coming. And we are going to have to adapt to that. In addition, you're going to have to adapt to your next role as well. I hope this has shown you how what you do today and what you did yesterday are going to necessarily change. But if you're feeling stuck, drop me a message on LinkedIn. I respond to every single one of them. If you need tailored advice, book a call with me or my team, and we'd be happy to help. Head over to the show notes to see a link to book in. But if in doubt, send me a message. Let's see what we can do. Until next time, remember, as always, stay in your tech leadership game, follow your dreams, because the world really does need that uniqueness that you bring as a leading woman in tech.